The black column's surface rippled as if it heard her, or maybe as if it was thinking about me. I stood at the edge, my fingers twitching but refusing to move forward. Every instinct told me this was the point I wouldn't come back from, that whatever it showed me wouldn't just be images, but something I'd have to carry forever. The girl's arm was still buried in the liquid. Her expression was unreadable. Eyes unfocused, lips slightly parted as if she were listening to a distant voice. "What did it show you?" I asked. She blinked slowly. "Not what's coming, what already came." I didn't understand, but I wasn't sure I wanted to. The surface of the column shifted, peeling back like water under a gust of wind, and there I was again, but not here, not in this chamber. I was standing outside the bunker entrance, daylight behind me. My boots were caked in the same red dust that pulsed in the walls now. I was holding something in my hands. I couldn't see what it was. The image dissolved, replaced by another me but not me. Skin pale and waxy, eyes black and still, standing in the stairwell while something moved in the shadows below. Then another me again, walking away from the girl, the sphere sealed behind me, the stairwell gone. 3 futures or 3 pasts. Couldn't tell. The murmurs in the walls grew louder, overlapping into a sound that was almost words. The girl withdrew her hand. Her skin was dry, unmarked. "It won't wait forever." A tremor rolled through the floor, stronger than before. Dust drifted from the dome above, spiraling into the black column, which absorbed it like breath. I closed my eyes and stepped forward. The surface clung to my hand instantly, pulling me in up to the elbow in less than a heartbeat. Heat surged through me, but beneath it was something colder, an absence that gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. The chamber vanished. There was no sensation of movement, no falling or flying, just exchange. One breath in the chamber, the next somewhere else entirely. The air was thin, sharp with the scent of ozone and burnt metal. I stood on a platform that stretched into mist in every direction. The surface was black and glassy, reflecting a sky I didn't recognize. A smear of red and violet clouds twisting in impossible patterns. There was no sun, only a faint, pulsing glow beneath the horizon, like the heartbeat of something buried deep under the skin of this place. Behind me, the black column still stood, suspended in nothing. But it was smaller now, barely the height of my chest. The girl wasn't there. I called her name, but the sound went nowhere. It didn't echo, didn't fade. It simply stopped, like the air itself had swallowed it. Shapes moved in the mist far below. At first they looked like shadows on water, but they were too large, too deliberate. Every so often, one would rise just enough for the light to catch on a surface, smooth, wet, and rippling before sinking again. A narrow bridge extended from the platform ahead, thin enough that I could see the mist curling up through the gaps beneath it. The black glass was warm under my boots. Halfway across I heard it, the knocking. Slow, steady, and impossibly loud. It was coming from somewhere ahead, though there was nothing visible except the bridge and the mist. With each knock, the glow on the horizon brightened. I reached the end of the bridge and stepped onto another platform, this one smaller, with something in the center. It was a door. Not a bulkhead or hatch, not the steel I'd expected from a bunker. Just a wooden door, the paint blistered and peeling, the handle tarnished brass. I reached for it, but before I touched the handle it moved, a single, sharp twist from the other side. The brass handle turned slowly, the scrape of metal on metal echoing in a place where echoes shouldn't exist. I took a step back, my boots whispering against the black glass floor. The mist curled tighter around the edges of the platform, like it wanted to see what came next. The door swung inward without a sound. Beyond it was a hallway. Not here, not in this impossible sky, but somewhere else entirely. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale, sickly glow over white tile floors. The air smelled faintly of bleach and something sweeter underneath, something rotten trying to hide. The door frame didn't touch the floor. The hallway simply floated in the void beyond, anchored to nothing, but looking solid enough to step into. From deep inside, I heard the faint hum of ventilation, and beneath it, a sound I almost didn't catch. Breathing. Slow. patient, waiting. I glanced behind me. The bridge was gone. The mist had closed in, the black column nowhere to be seen. The platform beneath me felt thinner now, like one wrong step might send me straight down into whatever moved below. I turned back to the door. There were marks along the frame. Scratches in the paint, some shallow, others deep enough to gouge the wood. I leaned closer and saw they weren't random. Letters. Words. Half faded. Don't let it close. A shadow moved at the far end of the hallway. Too far to see clearly but tall enough to brush the ceiling. The breathing stopped. Then it started again, closer. Without thinking, I stepped through the door. The tile was cold under my boots, the lights overhead flickering in a rhythm that didn't match the hum of the ventilation. As soon as I crossed the threshold, the door behind me slammed shut. The slam of the door echoed far longer than it should have, the sound bouncing off the tile and glass until it blurred into the buzz of the lights. I turned, but the door was gone. Not locked, not blocked. Gone. The wall behind me was smooth and white, stretching endlessly in both directions. The hallway was narrow enough that my shoulders almost brushed the walls. The air was still, heavy with the same faint rot I'd smelled before. It didn't come in waves. It was constant, like the building itself was steeped in it. Something dripped from the ceiling, a slow, steady pat into a dark stain on the floor. I stepped over it without looking up. The breathing was back. Closer now, but always just ahead of me. Every time I took a step, it retreated, keeping the same distance. The tiles underfoot changed gradually, from clean white to scuffed gray to something mottled and stained, as if water had seeped up from beneath. The buzzing lights overhead began to hum in harmony with each other, the pitch rising until it sat right on the edge of pain. A corner appeared ahead. As I approached, I saw movement. Not the figure from before, but a flicker of shadow across the floor, as if something had just turned and vanished out of sight. I rounded the corner. The hallway widened into a waiting area, or what had once been one. Chairs sat in neat rows, all facing a dark television mounted high on the wall. Dust clung to the screen in a way that made it look like it had been wet once, long ago. There were magazines scattered on the floor, their pages stuck together. I picked one up without thinking, and froze. Every page was the same photograph. The bunker stairwell, shot from the top looking down. On the last page, a figure stood halfway down the stairs, its head tilted back to look directly at the camera. The face was mine. From somewhere beyond the waiting area came a knock, slow and deliberate. 3 times. The breathing stopped again. The knock came again, louder this time, shaking dust from the vents above. I set the magazine down, careful not to look at the photograph again, and moved toward the sound. A single doorway stood at the far end of the waiting area, its frame crooked, as though the wall had shifted around it. The closer I got, the more I realized the knocking wasn't on the door itself. It was coming from inside whatever lay beyond. I pushed the door open. The room was small, windowless, and lit by a single flickering bulb. The walls were covered in peeling green paint, water stains blooming across the surface in shapes that almost looked like faces. In the center stood a table. On it sat a box, metal, dented, no larger than a toolbox. The knocking was coming from inside it. Every strike made the lid tremble. I circled the table, my fingers hovering over the latch. The metal was warm to the touch. When I opened it, the knocking stopped instantly. Inside was a tape recorder. Old, heavy. This plastic casing cracked along one edge. The reels began to spin without me pressing anything. A voice hissed through the static. My voice. "You're late. You always were." I felt the words in my chest before I processed them. The voice wasn't coming from the recorder alone. It was in the walls, the floor, the air itself. The tape clicked, then spun backward, the voice distorting into something that was no longer mine. "Don't leave the hallway." The bulb overhead flared bright white, then went out, plunging the room into darkness. From the doorway behind me came the breathing, closer than it had ever been. I froze. The breathing wasn't just close. It was right behind me, each exhale raising the tiny hairs along the back of my neck. The air smelled damp, metallic, like blood left to sit in water. I didn't turn. Some part of me knew that looking would mean more than just seeing, it would mean acknowledging and maybe inviting whatever it was. The recorder on the table clicked again. The reel spun forward this time, the hiss of static thickening until it almost masked the breathing. Almost. "It's patient," my voice whispered through the static. It always was. The sound of weight shifting on the floorboards came next. Slow, deliberate. The bulb above sputtered weakly, casting brief flashes across the walls. Each time it lit, a shadow stretched over me, long and crooked, arms bending in ways they shouldn't. On the third flicker, I moved. I lunged for the table, grabbed the recorder, and shoved it into my bag without thinking. As soon as it was gone from sight, the breathing hitched, just for a second, then turned into something else. A low, wet laugh. I bolted through the doorway, back into the waiting area. The chairs scraped faintly against the tile as I passed, though I didn't touch them. The hallway beyond was darker now, the buzzing lights reduced to a dim pulse like a dying heartbeat. Somewhere behind me the laugh followed. Not loud, not hurried, just there. I kept moving until the hallway ended in another door, this one heavy steel with a rusted wheel in the center. As my hand touched the wheel, the laughter stopped. The silence was worse. The wheel resisted at first, stiff from rust, but it gave with a groan that echoed down the hallway like something waking up. I pulled the door open. A wall of cold air rolled out, sharp and dry, tasting of dust and stone. The room beyond was enormous, far larger than the hallway could have contained. Rows of shelves stretched into darkness, each one stacked with objects that didn't belong together. Rusted lanterns, cracked helmets, boxes stamped with symbols I didn't recognize. Some of the shelves were warped, leaning as if they'd been soaked and dried over and over. Above, the ceiling disappeared into shadows, though I could hear faint movement somewhere high up, like ropes sliding over metal. I stepped inside, my boots leaving faint prints in the dust. On the nearest shelf sat a small wooden crate, the lid slightly ajar. Inside, wrapped in brittle paper, was a photograph, black and white, edges curled with age. It was me standing at the top of the bunker's stairwell. Only this time, there was no figure halfway down. The stairs were empty. I set it back and moved deeper. The cold intensified the further I went, until I could see my breath. Shelves gave way to rows of tall filing cabinets, their drawers labeled with dates. Some years ahead of the present, others centuries behind. One drawer was open. A single file lay inside, its cover stamped with a name I hadn't heard in years. My sister's. Before I could reach for it, something moved between the rows. A quick, low glide, too fast to follow but heavy enough that the shelves rattled. The steel door behind me slammed shut. The rows of shelves seemed to grow taller as I stood there, the cold gnawing into my skin. Somewhere in the darkness above, the faint sound of rope sliding over metal stopped. Silence. Then, from 3 rows over, came the scrape of claws on steel. I stepped backward, my shoulder brushing a filing cabinet. The metal was ice cold, and for a moment I thought I felt it breathing. Another scrape, closer. This time I caught a glimpse. A pale arm, far too long, darted between the shelves, fingers curling against the wood like it was testing its strength. The file with my sister's name still lay in the open drawer, waiting. Against my better judgment, I grabbed it and pulled it free. The paper inside was brittle, the ink faded, but the first page wasn't words. It was a map, not of the bunker, not of anywhere I recognized. The lines curved in impossible loops, staircases folding into hallways that led back to themselves. In the center was a single mark. X. The claws scraped again, this time directly behind me. I turned. Something leaned around the end of the aisle, a head too high, a neck bent wrong, skin stretched thin and translucent over bones that didn't fit. Its eyes were the wrong size for its face, too round, too dark, reflecting nothing. It didn't blink. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere. "You're not supposed to have that." I stuffed the file into my bag and ran. The thing's voice followed me as I ran, each word bending in pitch, almost amused. Put it back. The shelves blurred past, the cold air burning my lungs. Somewhere behind me, claws raked across wood, splintering it like wet bark. I cut left between two leaning rows, nearly toppling a stack of crates. Something heavy slammed into the floor where I'd just been standing, hard enough to rattle the steel door I'd entered through. I didn't look back. The layout made no sense. Rows twisted into spirals, ending in dead ends that hadn't been their seconds before. Aisles doubled back, depositing me right where I'd started. Every time I thought I'd gained distance, I'd hear it again. The soft pad of two long limbs against the floor, keeping pace without rushing. The map in my bag felt heavier with each step, like it was pulling me somewhere specific. I followed the tug, skidding around a final corner into a narrow passage I didn't remember seeing before. It ended at a hatch in the floor, rusted, square, with a ring set into its center. The moment I touched it, the thing stopped moving. The silence was worse than the chase. Then, from the darkness just beyond the last row, I heard the words again. Slower this time, almost gentle. Go on. See where it leads. The hatch was ice cold under my fingers. I pulled. The hatch groaned as it opened, the hinges straining like they hadn't moved in decades. A rush of air spilled out, damp, stale, and warmer than the archive above. A ladder descended into blackness. The rungs were slick, leaving a film on my palms as I climbed down. The sound of the hatch closing above me echoed down the shaft like a slow heartbeat. The bottom came sooner than I expected. My boots sank into soft earth, not concrete. The air smelled of soil and rust, with something faintly sweet beneath it, like rotting fruit. I turned on my flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, revealing a tunnel just wide enough to walk through. Roots bulged from the walls, curling like veins. Water dripped from the ceiling, each drop sending ripples through shallow puddles along the floor. The map's weight in my bag seemed to pull me forward, deeper into the tunnel. Every few steps, I caught flashes of movement, something darting just outside the edge of the light, always ahead of me. The tunnel sloped downward. The deeper I went, the more the walls changed, from dirt to stone, from stone to something smoother, almost polished. Strange markings began to appear. Spirals, jagged lines, and shapes that looked like human figures with too many arms. Eventually, the tunnel opened into a chamber. At its center was a table of black stone, the surface etched with the same markings from the walls. Resting on it was an object wrapped in decayed cloth. I stepped closer. The thing inside shifted, and then a voice, not behind me, not ahead, but inside my head, spoke. You've carried the key far enough. The bundle on the stone table pulsed once, as if breathing. My hands shook as I unwrapped it, the cloth falling away in damp clumps. Inside was not a key in the usual sense. It was a shard of metal, jagged at one end, warm to the touch. Symbols ran along its surface, shifting when I tried to focus on them. It hummed faintly, a vibration that traveled up my arm into my teeth. The voice in my head deepened. Every road you've walked has been toward this. Every door you've opened was ours. The chamber brightened without any visible source. The walls seemed to peel away, revealing not more stone, but a vast expanse of black water stretching in every direction. Far out across that water, a single door stood on nothing. Tall, narrow, wooden. The shard in my hand pulled me toward it, harder with every step. My boots met the water. It was warm, rising to my knees, my waist. The door loomed closer, impossibly tall now, the wood slick with condensation. I reached out. The shard dissolved in my hand, seeping into my skin like ink. The door opened. Beyond was not another room. It was a reflection. The bunker, the archive, the hatch, every hallway I'd walked, every shadow I'd avoided, all laid out in a perfect, silent mirror of my path. And in the center stood me, not older, not younger, the same, but his eyes were black, his skin pale like the thing in the shelves. You brought it back, he said. His voice was mine, but wrong, stretched and hollow. Brought what? The place. Around us, the mirrored walls cracked. Water poured in, not from above, but from behind him. Faces swirled in the current. My sisters, the thing from the shelves, the long-armed shadow from the waiting room. "You could leave," he said. "But it won't." The water reached my chest. The reflections of every corridor I'd walked shattered like glass, fragments drifting in the flood. "If you step through," he whispered, "it all starts again." I looked back at the door. It was still open, showing the black water and the endless expanse beyond. I stepped forward. The door slammed shut behind me,